Okay, today's topic, horse-related terms, jargon, and slang. My motivation for this is if you ever go to horse shows or rodeos, sometimes what the cowboys and cowgirls are talking about sound foreign. Some of the terms they use are not available to the common person, let's put it that way. So I've put about 100 terms in this video, about 60 illustrations, and at the end of a definition, if there's this acronym ITF, that means, hey, I'm going to illustrate this in just a few seconds. So I want to make sure you know that I don't think I got all terms, and I know I didn't. So it's not totally complete. I could have went on forever. I do want to say that the terms I have on the video are alphabetically arranged. So if you're looking for some kind of T word or F word or whatever, then you can advance the video till you start seeing terms that start with the letter you're interested in. Or you can watch the whole darn thing. It's going to be well over an hour. But the illustrations are precious, and I'm going to say that most equine term dictionaries aren't illustrated. Most of the things are not illustrated. So I spent several hundred hours finding great illustrations. My name is Rod. Been working with animals 60 plus years, which is amazing. And it's been a fun ride. No medical advice is intended because things change so fast. I will show some drugs and so forth, but I'll never say, oh, do this for that and so many milligrams per, kilogram body weight. Nope, not getting into that. So, yeah, we're going to go. So now here we have ACE. That's slang for acepromazine. This drug has been around forever. It's a tranquilizer and used mostly in horses, dogs, and cats. Can also be used as a pre-anesthetic. And of course, I'm going to show you some bottles. So yeah, here I'm going to just show a few bottles of acepromazine. Not giving you any dosages or anything. Here's a bottle that's injectable. Oral solution, and it's kind of interesting, apple flavor, so I bet you that might be for horses. There's also tablets, powder, and it's amazing how many forms it comes in. And then there's a little tidbit here that I ran into on the internet. If you're using acepromazine tablets and your dog is wearing a flea collar, you might want to talk to your best veterinarian for that. Notice how I'm not giving any advice. So now we're going to talk about determining the age of a horse. That's usually done by its teeth. And I've got a couple things that are following to tell you about, and there's a great website by the USDA that you can go to. I don't have the pictures from it. Okay, on the left side of the screen are some examples of how you age horses and how the teeth actually change in their position and their appearance. And that's very small print, whatever. But this QR code over here will take you to this website at the USDA.gov site that's got excellent pictures of the horse's mouth and how the teeth change. And somebody did a lot of good work there, and it's well worth going there if you're interested in how that can be. So now AI is an interesting acronym because when I was in graduate school it meant artificial insemination. Of course, nowadays, if you read anything, newspaper, whatever, it means artificial intelligence. But I'm going to stick with the horses. And horses can be bred artificially from semen collected by stallions, but not everybody does it. The jockey club, if you do that, won't let you register the animal, the offspring. So, anybody that's in the horse area would know that automatically. I'm just saying you can artificially breed mares with stallion semen. It's usually not frozen. And they can do this for pigs as well, sheep as well, goats as well. And then what's really interesting is, and years ago this has been worked out for cattle, you can freeze bull semen. And it's a very regimented procedure, but then it will last for years in liquid nitrogen. But for horses, it's all fresh, and I have really no idea how many horses, how many mares are bred artificially with semen collected from a stallion. I know not many thoroughbreds do it, if at all. Okay, now we've got the term astride, and that's really just how people ride horses usually, one leg on each side of the horse. This is the very normal position, but I'll show you an image of a person riding astride. And here we have an Englishman riding out in the countryside, I'm sure, in England, and he's riding astride, one leg there and one leg there. Yes, that's the best. Okay, now we're talking about bulk or bulking. The horse will bulk. The horse is bulking. And this is when they refuse to move. Okay, some horses are very stubborn. They don't want to get into the horse stall or the horse trailer. They don't want to get out of the horse trailer. They don't want to go to another pasture. They just want to stand by the barn. On the farm, we had a horse that balked because it just didn't want to go away from the barn area. Okay, bar. This is very interesting because most people would never guess what we're talking about when we talk about the horse and a bar. And this is the gum area between the teeth where the bit rests. And it's really an area, and you're going to see an illustration of this shortly. It's behind the incisors, but in front of the premolars. And so, if you're interested in anatomy, this is a great horse skull. We're looking on the left side of the horse. And just quickly, upper incisors, lower incisors, canine, 4 defined canines there. So I pretty much know this is a stallion's skull. There's a little knob here that's a tooth. We're going to talk about that when we get to the W's. That's wolf teeth. And then this one here is the first premolar, and there's about 3 premolars and then 3 molars. But the wolf teeth are always right tucked up there, right by the premolar, and the canines are out here in the middle. But here's the bar where the bit fits across. There's no teeth on the upper arcade or the lower arcades, and so it's a great place. I mean, I don't know how they design that, but that's where the bit goes across. Okay, I guess I got this in the B, so barefoot, but on shod as well. That means the horse isn't wearing any horseshoes, and of course I'll show you an on-shod horse next to a shod horse. Okay, so on the left here we have an on-shod horse. I love how that circular formation is there. Then there's this V-shaped thing we're going to talk about. It's a frog. So on-shod here, and then shod. A nice horseshoe. but the horseshoes never go across this area. There's really nothing to embed a nail in, and this frog should be exposed to the ground. So shod on shod. Well, nobody in a million years would guess what a bean is when you talk about horses, especially stallions. So there are these beans that collect, that form maybe is the better way to say that, and they're also called sheath beans, and they're hard, waxy balls of smegma. That's a great term. Smegma is a collection of material in the sheath of males, full of bacteria, semen, all kinds of secretions. And in the case of the stallion, it accumulates in this area, and a lot of times they're formed in the urethra fossa. And the fossa means a depression. So it's a depression in the urethra, giving it some space. And of course, we're going to show you beans. Okay, so I like when something is held because then you get an idea of the size relative to like somebody's hand. But these are all illustrations of beans. There's no really correct size or shape. Here's a quarter, so that person was great. They got a bean out, and you have to basically usually go in the sheath of the horse and get them by hand. And so there's some interesting illustrations. That's the end of the penis there in this photo. So it's always fun to have a little comedy as these two horsewomen are talking. Here one says on the left, "You touch it first." Then the woman on the right says, "He's your horse. You touch it first." And then the horse is going, how about if nobody touches it? So a good little illustration about beans. And they're wearing gloves. That's the best. So now instead of bell bottoms, like pants from years ago, we have a bell boot. And this is like a protective boot that goes on the front legs of horses, and it prevents the back feet from coming forward and overreaching and clipping the front hooves. Of course, we're going to have an illustration. Okay, so here's our bell boot. Just put around the front legs and probably held by Velcro, it looks like. And it's going to prevent the overreaching of the hind legs and striking this back area, which can do a lot of damage. So a billet. It's really a leather strap with holes that are punched in so you can make adjustments for the size of the horse. And it just simply helps hold the saddle in place because you don't want that saddle slipping around. And of course, we're going to show you an image of that. I will say sometimes I give you an illustration that has more than what I want to point out, but that means you can learn other things. Anyway, here's the billet strap here. It's got little holes on it. There'd be another corresponding strap on the other side. And it's going to help hold the horse. And here's the billet keeper here, and there's a offside billet here, all to keep the horse's saddle in place. I always like to ride with a horn because, man, I hang on to that thing. I do also ride bareback and have some stories about how I was bucked off and whatever, but don't feel sorry for me. Okay, now we're going to talk about the bit. It's a metal or synthetic piece that fits into the horse's mouth and is attached from one side of the bridle to another, and it basically helps you control the horse. It rests in the space that we called the bar before, between the incisors and, you shouldn't say back teeth, it's the premolars. And it's critical part of the bridle, the bit is, but you should know not every bridle has a bit, and we'll be coming up to that. Okay, here's the bit. Here's the full bit. Here's a little bit of part of it as we see in the bridle. So this horse is being controlled by this bit, and you can kind of see it's rounded. It's not going to cut anything. Okay, now when you see the term black type, we're not talking anything about coat color. It's just really a way to indicate in advertisements that the horse has won or placed in races. So it's indicating this achievement, let's put it that way. Of course, not all horses have won or placed in a race, and so it kind of draws your eyes to the horse's name. Okay, the term blowing. Well, this is when the horse exhales rapidly through flared nostrils. And you should realize that the horse can't breathe through its mouth like I'm doing right now. I'm breathing through my mouth. Horses can't do that. Everything has to go through the nostrils. And it's totally crazy. There's a thing called the blue hen mare. I'd love to know the history of that. I don't, and yeah, whatever. It's a mare that always produces great foals, healthy, male or female, colts or fillies. A blue hen mare. Well, here's a term you don't want to say in an airport. Oh yeah, he's bomb-proof. Well, when you talk about a horse that's bomb-proof, it's a horse that doesn't spook at all. I mean, they're very mellow. When I go to rodeos, I'm always amazed at when the cowboys come out, and come out with cowgirls too. I don't want to be sexist here, but they've got their revolvers, and they're shooting in the air and making all kinds of sound. The crowd is cheering, and the horse is like just going to do what it's going to do, and it's not buck. It's bomb-proof. Okay, we're still in the B's. There's a lot of B's and C's and D's. Anyway, bowed tendon. It's a tendon in the horse, sometimes called tendinitis. It's an injury where the horse leg appeared to have a bowed or curved appearance due to the inflammation. So itis always means inflammation. There's a swelling in the superficial or even a deep digital flexor tendon. This swelling results from damage to the tendon fibers and can range in severity from mild to very complete tears. And you should know that about biology. In most of these cases of things that go wrong, you can have something very mild that you can't even detect, and that might be called subclinical. And then there's these like many steps that they can go through or advance to, but then not go beyond. And very interesting. So, of course, we're going to show you a picture of a bowed tendon. You can see on the integument here, that's the skin, the bowing. This also here, get my laser pointer right. So that's a bowed tendon. And we have another horse with a bowed tendon. That side is greater than this side. They don't have to be equal on each side. But if one side is bowed, the other side has some kind of bowing also. Okay, so now we mentioned bridle before when we talked about the bit. So we showed that horse's head with the bridle and then the bit. And it's the typical headgear worn by horses, that you can control the horse. And it includes the bit that goes into the bar space of the mouth and reins, so you can like pull left, pull right, and of course we're going to show something. So here's a nice little image of a bridle that has a bit. Now I don't think I mentioned it before, but I'll give you a heads up. Some bridles don't have a bit. and we'll show you one of those. Anyway, nice labeled, nice looking horse. Okay, well, here's something brood mare. You know, it's something like close to like a brood cow. And if you ever hear the word brood, that means it's an animal, in this case a mare, used for breeding, and they're used for producing offspring. And you know, I won't say it again, but you know, mares usually have single offspring. The horse uterus, the mare's uterus, doesn't like twins. So twins are really contraindicated, although you'll see some twins being born, but a horseman doesn't want twins. They want one good foal. Okay, now we got more slang. Remember, Ace was way in the A's. Now we got bute, and it's phenylbutazone slang for that. Drug used to control pain, inflammation. It's an NSAID. If you ever see that acronym, that means non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug. And when you're competing, maybe some places don't let you use phenylbutazone. And there's a lot of rules, and then sometimes there's a lot of violations. Okay, so I just got two pictures of phenylbutazone, and this one is injectable form. This one's oral, and it says horses only. But I just wanted to show the bottles and let you know that they exist. Okay, buy and out. So buy is a term, out is a term, and it's usually referring to the foal and its parents. So a foal is by its sire and out of its dam. And I think you can always remember that, because the dam, the mare is going to, the newborn horse is coming out of the mare. I don't want to get graphic here. But then the sire was, you know, by the sire. So then I looked up Seabiscuit. Seabiscuit is by hard tack and out of swing on. So swing on was the mom, dad was hard tack. Okay, here's canine teeth. And I showed it on that one skull. And they're located caudal to the incisors, so that means behind the incisors, going towards the back of the mouth. All male horses have four canines, and that was the skull that we saw. Two upper, two lower on each side. You know, one on left, one up lefter, one on the left upper, and then right upper, and then two lower, left and right. Okay. And only about 25 of the females have them, and they're much smaller. But here's an interesting point about canine teeth. They erupt, that means coming through the gum, at 4 to 6 years of age. So if you have a stallion and they haven't erupted yet, you know the horse is probably less than 4 years of age. They don't serve a purpose, except they can hurt you or other animals. So they have no purpose other than as a fighting weapon. So they're shortened, they're smooth. I've got an image coming up, but you don't want to take them out, because then you might invite infections in those empty sockets. Yeah, so if you notice, I didn't say ITF on my last image there, but that's okay. So now let me orientate you. Upper incisors, lower incisors. So if we went to this direction, my arrow's going pointing the wrong way, but if I go this way, that's called rostral. Then this way is caudal, because you can't use cranial when you're in the head. There's caudal, and the antonym of caudal is rostral. And there's the upper canine, there's the lower canine on this left side of the head. Then we want to file those down. So they're basically, benign? But in most cases, I don't think they want to take them out, because then you might set up a nice little infection in that empty socket. Okay, so now this is that stallion skull that we saw before, but it wasn't labeled. So now here's a labeled version of it. The incisors, upper and lower. Then the canine teeth, there's 4. So this is going to be a stallion. The wolf teeth, tucked up right by the premolars there. Then they call this the interdental space, and remember that's really the bar. Then you've got premolars and molars. And then if you do go to that website about aging the horses by its teeth, they'll talk more about how teeth are always erupting, and the way they wear can help you a lot knowing the age. Okay, we're still in the C's. Wow. I mean, there's a lot of first in the front part of the alphabet. Cannon bone. Well, I could say cannon bones. There's a cannon bone on every leg in the lower leg region, and they provide a lot of support. Okay, well, I know this is a busy diagram with a lot of labels, but there's the cannon bone there. There's another cannon bone. There's the back right, back left cannon bone. Very important bone, supports a lot of the weight. And maybe I should say that if you don't know the weight distribution, the front 2 legs bear about 60% of the weight of the horse, and the rear 2 legs, which are bigger, support 40% of the weight of the horse. So that's very interesting. 60% of the weight on the front, 40% of the weight on the back. Yes, now chestnut. In this case, I had to put anatomy behind it because it also refers to a color, which we'll find out shortly. But the chestnut is a callus-like structure on the inside of each leg. So you'd call that the medial side, the side of the leg that's facing the middle of the animal. And so let's find out what they look like. So here we are. Here's the front legs of the horse. There's a chestnut. There's a chestnut here that we can't really see because of the orientation of the animal. And here's another chestnut and a chestnut on the back legs. I will point out down here ergots, and we'll be talking about those shortly. But the chestnut in this case refers to this structure, not just another view of the chestnut on that leg. That's the front left, and here's the rear left there. We can't see them on the right side because they're facing the middle. Now we still have chestnut, but now we're going to do a coat color. And it's a reddish brown. I've got a couple images, but the coat colors of horses is interesting. If you ever want to kind of get lost in translation, pick up a book called Horse Coat Color Genetics. Oh my gosh. And if you have 2 or 3 weeks, study it and you'll understand it better. There's a lot of neat things about coat color, like the lethal white gene, and then gray horses, and then, I don't know why they made them so complicated. Coat color genetics in horses is interesting. Okay, this is a chestnut horse, sorry for my abbreviations. Not all purely red, and it's got some white socks, and there's a lot of what's called fashion genes in a horse, and it can put color different places, and it's interesting to study. You get a good appreciation for genetics. Okay, now another beautiful chestnut. It's a male because there's the sheath. We can't get close to see if there's a bean in there, but that's where the bean would be. I don't know if it's a stallion or a gelding. We're going to come to gelding, so maybe I won't say any more about that. Okay, choke. Now, with all these terms, 100, I can't stop and explain a lot about each one, because then this video would be 24 hours long. But choke is a blockage of the esophagus. And the esophagus is that tube that carries food from the mouth to the stomach. And a lot of times, if a horse is choking, it's because there's feed impacting in the esophagus. But here's the interesting thing. A choking horse can still breathe because horses cannot breathe through their mouths. You could take a cork and plug up their mouth and they would still breathe because they're termed obligate nasal breathers. They have to breathe through their nostrils. So when they're racing around at Churchill Downs, everything coming in and going out is coming through the nostrils. Okay, so here's a term, cob. You know, nobody on the street would know that horse is a cob. Well, it's a stocky horse. It doesn't have to be a certain breed, but it's stocky and it can take any rider that will approach it. I mean, when I'm saying that, I mean lighter, heavier, whatever. So here we have this lovely cob horse, very muscular, wouldn't be afraid of any rider that came to it, got a nice back that support a lot of weight. Okay, so now the coffin bone. Why did they name it that? I don't know, but it's the most distal bone in the hoof, and we're going to see it, and it can be moved or will move in bad things. Now for this picture, I put it sideways, so that's why everything, it's, when I found it, it was, so the hoof is, horizontal, but here it is vertical. Because I thought you could see the coffin bone better. It's this last bone in the lower leg. And I want to point out the surface of this coffin bone is pretty much parallel to this hoof wall. Parallel, parallel. That means it's probably in the place it always was. Notice they got the frog here, right? We talked about the frog before. Anyway, that's the coffin bone. Okay, then one more illustration of the coffin bone. This is somebody's drawing, of course. And the point is, this is the front of the hoof, and the surface of the coffin bone should be parallel to the surface of the hoof wall. And we're going to find out things later where it's not. And this tip might actually be protruding down through the floor of the hoof, and that would be terrible. Now, this is cold-blooded. Wasn't it Truman Capote did In Cold Blood? Can't remember. I might have that book wrong. Anyway, cold-blooded horses are large, heavy. They're draft horses. They don't have any of the light horse, thoroughbred, or Arabian in them. They're called gentle giants. I love to go to horse shows and interact with these guys because, they just love to be scratched and petted, and they love to interact with people, usually. And, of course, an example might be the Clydesdale, but I have an image of. So here's my image of a draft horse. This looks like a Shire, S-H-I-R-E. A lot of feathering. We're going to come up to that. Gentle giants, often 2,000 pounds and more. And I just love being around him. Okay, now we're still in the C's. Man, anyway, colic. For every animal, whether it's human or any animal, it means abdominal pain, and that's very nonspecific. But unfortunately for horses, it's a leading cause of death because it usually involves the large intestine and or cecum. And the causes of colic are almost infinite. It'd take probably a year to explain all the causes of colic and the surgery involved, and if you have a horse with colic and it's severe, you need to find a great veterinarian that's got a lot of experience with colic. So, anyway, okay, colt. Well, that's a young male horse that has not been gelded, not been neutered, not having the testicles removed. Okay? Not. Okay, cornet or the coronary band. It's directly above the hoof of the horse, and it's a band that goes around the top of the hoof. We're going to show you. So here we got it. The cornet or the coronary band. It's this region right above the hoof. So now we're talking about the coupling of the horse. And it's kind of like where the front end of the horse is coupled to the back end of the horse, I guess. It's really the loin region. It's a sunken region below the lumbar vertebra. And it's behind the last rib and in front of the point of the hip. So let's show you the coupling. So it's not labeled coupling here, it's labeled the loin. But it's kind of like the region that connects the front of the animal, the front part of the animal to the back part of the animal. And there's a minimum amount of bones in this region because, up here you've got the rib bones and here you've got the hips and the pelvis, but here you only have the lumbar vertebra that branches across here. But like this region, there's no bone at all here. So, of course, another interesting term, cover. It's really the act of mating. So you can say a stallion will cover a mare. So you could say my stallion named Bo covered my neighbor's mare whose name was Betsy. I don't know. Anyway, cover. Of course, we have to bring the cow into it, I guess, sometime. Look how many C's we got. Anyway, cow-hocked. That's where the back knees are set inward and the lower legs are splayed outward. So remember, you can always pause this video and maybe take a screenshot if, something looks good to you. I'm just looking at this far right image where the knees are very close together, and then that makes the lower part of the leg kind of splayed out, and there you've got cow-hocked. So cribbing, that's a term where no person on the street would say, if you asked them, what's cribbing? Well, is that what you put a baby in? No, cribbing, it's interesting. It's a vice. It's a vice of horses that are kept in stables. If you're kept in a stable, then you're bored, really, right? The horse will grab the edge of an object with its teeth, a pen or 2x4 with its teeth, the incisors, yes, and then arch its back, and then it will do that and bite down, but it might even suck air at the same time. And it's thought to have a calming effect, and it might have like a pacifier for a baby, I guess. Might be a good analogy. So now we've got the croup. Well, it's the region of the horse that forms the top line of the hindquarters. So it's going to be caudal to the loin region. So here we go. There's the croup, the top line of the back of the horse, and it's caudal to the loin, which was also called the coupling. So a daisy cutter. Now remember, we're trying to include terms that you may not have ever heard before. So this is a horse that has kind of a low, flat movement. It's not going to be having the rider go up and down a lot. It's kind of a calm, flat movement. And I guess if you get a hunter horse like that, that's the best. Well, maybe most people know what the dam is, but I just wanted to make sure I included it because the dam is the mother of the horse. And I think later I might have sire, and the sire is the father of the horse. So the dam is the mom. So now instead of talking about a person that's dead broke, that means you have no money in your checking account, This means a well-trained and dependable horse for any rider, whether they're very experienced or not. When I was in Estes Park, Colorado, and we went on a trail ride, I had a dead broke horse on the trail. It was so calm, knew where it was going. I could have fallen asleep up on the horse, but I would have missed all that beautiful scenery. But my horse was dead broke, and most horses were, because for liability, that's the best. Terms are weird. Double bank, that just means you got an extra person on the horse. Maybe if you're giving some children a ride, you can double bank, but I hate to see two adults on the same horse unless it's really a cob or a big draft horse. So, we've mentioned draft horse, heavy horses. When I was younger, my grandpa plowed the potato patch with two big draft horses. Butch and Dan, I think their names were. I would always ride on one of them while he was out there doing that. And I'll remember getting off the horse and I couldn't hardly walk because my legs had been stretched by the wideness, the width of the draft horses. But it's a fond memory that I have. So here we go. I could be very much on top of that horse. That could be my grandfather. It's not. But that's what he did. Plowed the potato patch. I think they had tractors, but I think the reason they did it, the rows, the width between the rows weren't very wide, and maybe they couldn't get anything else other than a couple draft horses there. But those are Percherons, I believe. Okay, dressage. I don't have an image of this because a still image, like one picture, would not do horse ballet justice. So if you're really interested in dressage, you need to search in YouTube or someplace to do horse dressage, and then you'll see how beautiful they move. It's an Olympic sport based on classical principles of horsemanship. They're beautiful. They are more graceful in their movement than I am. Okay, now we're going through these terms because these are horse-related terms, slang, right, and jargon. My wife might call me an easy keeper. I may be too easy a keeper. Anyway, it's a horse that maintains weight easily on a standard feed. It's just, always going to be kind of maintaining a good body condition without a lot of work on your part. So now we've got the ergot. Remember, that's on the lower leg, and it's a callus-like structure, not much unlike the chestnuts, but it's on the back of the fetlock, and of course, we're going to show you that. So I'm going to use the same picture that we had before, but the ergot are back here behind each fetlock, and we're going to show you a closer picture too. So here's a fetlock on one lower leg of the horse, and the other corresponding leg, it's moving, so we can't see the fetlock, although it would be like almost right up on top of here. Obviously the horse is shod, but there's the frog, and the frog is left alone. You don't hammer into the frog. Okay, farrier. Yeah, a professional. And if you got a good farrier, they're worth their weight in gold. Horse trimming, corrective shoeing, normal shoeing, they're really important. You got to trim those hooves. Sometimes people don't have enough money and the hooves keep growing and look like two skis on the horse. Now here's a image of a young lady shoeing a horse. This is how it's typically done. You take that front leg, that's the front left leg of the horse, and she's got it squeezed between her knees, and now she's working on it. And a good farrier is worth their weight in gold. I think this person, this young woman here, I remember the image saying that she worked in Illinois and Indiana. Now that might be in the past, but she's working hard and she's got all my respect. Okay, feathering. Feathers. We saw that on that one draft horse. It's long hair on the fetlocks. So let's look at that. Here's feathering at its best. Here's the front legs. 1, 2, of course, and then the back legs. We're not seeing that fourth leg over here, but you can bet it's got a lot of feathering on there. Got to keep them clean. If they're show horses, of course, they're going to be kept clean and so forth. Okay, now we're going to talk about a feral horse. Notice it doesn't say wild horse. So we've got to distinguish between a feral horse and a wild horse. So a feral horse is one that lives in the wild, okay, but its genes can be traced back to domesticated animals. It's kind of like a feral cat. Feral cats are living out in the wild, but they're very much related to our domestic cats. So, can't be called a wild horse. Now, I know we've used the term fetlock before when we did the feathering, but feathering comes before fetlock, so alphabetically I'm still true here, but it's the joint above the pastern, so we'll see that. So it's the joint above the pastern, so here's the pastern, and there's that joint, the fetlock, okay? So, yeah, and we used this diagram or labeled picture about 3 times now. Okay, now we're talking about the filly. It's a young female horse that has never produced offspring, because as soon as they're producing offspring or have produced their first offspring, then we would call them a mare. So a filly, a young female horse. Okay, so now this is another one of these interesting terms like floating. Or you can say, my horses will be floated this afternoon. And the typical person on the street will have no idea what you're doing. And what you're doing is you're filing down sharp points on the teeth that form on especially their lateral surfaces from just chewing. And you get some really sharp points. I got cut one time by the points in a sheep that I was intubating. I still have the scar on my thumb because they can have these points too, although they don't live as long as horses and they don't have problems, but you need to float horses' teeth about once a year. Of course, that's the advantage of this illustrated dictionary illustrated video I'm making, because now you know the definition, but it doesn't show you much as this. This is a electric powered rasp. They don't have to be electrically powered. They can be just mechanical that you hold in your hand. But it brings up a couple points. The horse is standing. It's tranquilized, but it's still standing. And then it's got a device to open the mouth, and a lot of times people will have lights someplace, maybe on their cap or on the end of the instrument, because you got to get them filed down. And that's another thing about doing any kind of technique on large animals, especially cattle and horses. If you can do them when they're standing up, that's a lot better. Of course, you can't do colic surgery in a horse standing up usually, but it's a lot better for everybody if they can be standing. Okay, now this is a general term, foal. It's a young horse of either sex, usually under 1 year of age. So a mare will have a foal, And you can classify it further by saying it's a colt or a filly. But sometimes at universities, when they have horses, they'll have what's called a foal watch. That means undergraduate students can basically stay in the pen with a horse that's going to foal and watch out for any trouble. Okay, another one of those funky terms, because you can say Mr. Johnson or Mrs. Johnson is the founder of our company. That's one thing. But founder here is kind of the endpoint of laminitis. It's when the lamina, you're going to see a picture of this, becomes so inflamed that the coffin bone isn't held in place, even may puncture the bottom surface of the hoof. And if it's bad enough, euthanasia of the horse is indicated. So, of course, pictures are worth 1,000 words. On the left, a healthy hoof. There's that coffin bone. We've explained it every once in a while. There's the surface of the most front surface of the coffin bone, parallel to the hoof wall. But then you got on the right, laminitis, and you can get shifting because the laminae are not going to adhere to each other, and you get movement, and you get a lame horse. And so God bless people that know how to dissect animals and make certain specimens. This is a mid-saddle cut of a hoof and its lower legs. There's the coffin bone again. Obviously that surface is not parallel to the surface of the hoof wall, and it looks like it's not very far away from protruding through the bottom part of the hoof. Can you imagine the infection that would set up if that thing protrudes and is touching the ground? Can't imagine. So we got another great image of the laminae. It's really feather-like structures that adhere to the coffin bone, that also adhere to the hoof wall. But if it gets inflamed, then they come apart and the coffin bone can rotate, and it's never a good deal. But it's a pretty good dissection job. Okay, now we've mentioned frog before, and I pointed it out, but the man on the street or the woman on the street would say, if you said, "Oh, would you point out the frog on this horse for me?" I mean, how would you know anything? Anyway, it's a V-shaped structure on the underside of the hoof, all four hooves, and it's a shock absorber. But another thing that's neat about it is it helps return blood to the heart, because that long leg, it's kind of nice to have a little extra pump to get the venous blood pumped back, because the venous system is very low pressure, although there are one-way valves in the veins. Okay, I'm just using that same image, V-shaped frog, and on this shod horse, another V-shaped frog. So then you can talk about the horse's gait. That's like galloping, trotting. It's a study in itself, but it's basically the way a horse moves its legs, the gait of the horse. And people that are really good can watch a horse move and can pick out defects. I'm not that good. But here's a touch of humor from one of my past classes. On a quiz, I asked students to define gait, G-A-I-T. One answer that I got, the opening in a fence. Okay, it made me laugh in the middle of the night. We're in the G's, huh? Gelding. A castrated male horse of any age. Gelded. The horse's testicles are removed. So get. It's the offspring of a stallion. I mean, that's a simple term, but you know, if you didn't know it, you might need the definition. So now we've got glass eye or walleye, not to be confused with the fish I love to eat, but it's really a horse with a distinct blue eye. There's nothing wrong with the sight of the horse. It's just, I'm not sure what percent of horses have blue eyes, but I don't think it's a very high percent. So here you can kind of see the bluish tint. Those are very big, beautiful eyes. And, you know, that song, was it Frank Sinatra? Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain? I may be wrong. Okay, gooseneck. Well, that could refer to a horse, maybe. You could say a horse has a gooseneck, but usually not. This is just a type of horse trailer, and it has a vertical shaft from the trailer that connects to the floor of the bed of the pickup. And it's kind of like the hookup is inside the bed, not on the bumper. So it's a gooseneck trailer. They're a little more stable when you're hauling them. So here's the gooseneck trailer. It's hard to see here, but there's this shaft that comes out of the front of the trailer, goes down and connects to a point in the bed of the pickup, the floor. And it's all very well constructed, and it's actually better to pull a trailer that's a gooseneck rather than at the bumper here. Now, it's usually not connected to the bumper. There's usually a trailer hitch underneath here that's connected to the frame. So it's pretty good, but that gooseneck trailer is a little more stable if it's connected by the gooseneck. So now the term green. I guess that this might be obvious, but you can have a green horse or a green rider. And basically that means they don't have much experience doing what they're doing. Green. So now if you say a horse is green broke, that means it's kind of got the basic saddle training, bridle stuff going on. It's, you know, not a very calm, bomb-proof horse, but it's beginning, and you know, you might want an experienced rider on it rather than somebody that's also green. Okay, so now hackamore. And I could have put hackamore bridle. But a hackamore is a bridle that has no bit. So remember we alluded to that earlier? Remember I said some bridles don't have a bit? And this is where there's a nose band, which they all have anyway, but it helps control the horse. But it's not a bit. It's a hackamore. So here we go. This is a bridle that has no bit. There's the mouth there. There's no connection, anything across. So maybe a little more comfortable for the horse. I'm not sure. But that's a hackamore. Okay, hands. This is measuring the height of a horse, but it's only at a certain spot. It's not like the top of the head or the top of the rump. You measure horses in hands, and you can say, oh, this draft horse is 16 hands. Anyway, it's measured from the ground to the withers. I'm going to show you that. And it's also, the one hand is 4 inches. So in this case, it looks like, so a 17-hand draft horse is 5 feet 8 inches tall at the withers, not the top of its head, because those draft horses, the top of the head is another couple feet away from that. So they can be very tall, but hands are measured at the wither. So here we go. There's the point of the withers, and you know, withers is coming up in the W's, but here's the withers, and you take that middle point there and you go straight down to the ground, and you measure that. And then whatever you measure, you can divide by 4 inches. If you measure that in so many inches, then you can divide by 4, and then have how many hands. Okay, we had easy keeper before. Now we have a hard keeper. It's just a horse that kind of struggles to maintain its weight. It might have some digestive problems, some metabolic problems. Um, in some animals, if the pancreas doesn't send out enough enzymes, some of the nutrients can't be digested and absorbed. So a hard keeper, hard to keep its weight. Okay, Hinny. Two different spellings there, but it's a sterile hybrid of a male horse and a female donkey. So male horse, stallion, female donkey, and it's a Hinny, usually sterile. Okay, so we've seen horseshoes before, but I just, to be complete here, a horseshoe is a curved metal bar attached to the underside of the wall of the hoof, but it doesn't cover the frog. Here we go. There's a horseshoe. The regions where nails could be put through and nailed into the hoof. I remember one time I was visiting Colorado and I found an old horseshoe in a riverbed. I wonder I can't remember where I put that, but I mean, it had to be maybe 100 years old. Well, so, remember we had cold-blooded. Now, hot-blooded is kind of the opposite. They're light, athletic. They're the thoroughbreds and Arabians. Those are the race horses, and they're sometimes very skittish, sometimes hard to handle. Just the slightest thing might put them off. Like if you're walking a thoroughbred and somebody accidentally opens a door right by where you're walking by, the horse might be gone through that opening before you can say, "What?" Okay, Jack, an uncastrated male donkey or ass. A jack. I guess that's where jackass comes from. Then we have a Jenny, Jeanette, a female donkey. Jigger, a horse that refuses to walk calmly, and instead of walking calmly, kind of does a nervous, bouncy jog. It just can't get comfortable. It doesn't want to do what it's doing. Okay, so now we have laminitis. We had founder first because F comes before L, but this is that inflammation of that lamina that you saw before. It can be related to nutrition, metabolism. It's not good. A horse can overeat, get in a feed bin it's not supposed to, and it come up with laminitis. Very interesting. So this is just showing you on the left a normal hoof. There's the hoof wall. The coffin bone is parallel, the surface at least. Over here, we don't have the parallel surfaces. So this is laminitis, giving away the lamina are loosening up and getting inflamed. Okay, so a mare, any female horse that has produced offspring. And, so I said before that horses don't like to have twins. Horse owners don't like them to have twins. It's really good if you can have one foal per one mare. Okay, now I've got the term mule. And a mule is the offspring from a male donkey and a female horse. Almost always sterile. Okay, now we got the term muster. That's not a term used much in the United States, but I remember having a student from Australia and they were telling me he worked on a cattle station, and once a year they would muster the cattle. And the darn thing, the cattle station was so large that they used helicopters to go get the cattle when they mustered them up. And if I remember right, the cattle station was larger than 1,000,000 acres. He gave me some pictures. Man, looked great. Okay, outlaw. Some country western singers years ago used to call themselves the Outlaws. Anyway, it's a horse that's vicious, can't be handled. Be careful because maybe you don't know it, but horses bite. They can bite you. They can strike out at you with their front legs. And then, of course, they can kick you with their rear legs. So there's been a lot of people hurt when they weren't careful. Okay, so now we've got parrot mouth, a congenital deformity. Notice that? That means born with, where the upper jaw is longer than the lower jaw. Overshot. Okay? So here we go. Overshot. That's the upper jaw. This is the lower jaw. These are the incisors, of course. These are the lower incisors. Overshot. Not the best when you're out grazing grass and trying to do normal things. Okay, the pastern. We've kind of pointed this out before, but, I had to put these things in alphabetical order. So it's the area of the leg between the fetlock and the hoof. And, the hoof, at the top of the hoof is really that coronary band. Got a little drawing here where the pastern is. It's between the fetlock joint and the coronary band, which is right down here. That's the pastern. So now we've got pig-eyed horses. Horses that tend to have unusually small eyes because, most horses have like remarkable, beautiful, big brown eyes. And a pig-eyed horse is very distinct, and we have an image of one. So here we do. We have a pig-eyed horse. You could probably acknowledge that that's smaller eyes than most horses have. Now the points of the horse are really the extremities, and a lot of times it becomes important to know what the points are when you're talking about coat color genetics. So the points of a horse: the tail, the edges of the ears, the mane, and then the lower legs, all 4 lower legs. Those are the points of a horse. So now we're talking about a quirt, which is a short, flexible whip used by some Western riders. And of course we have an image of that. So this young lady is using a quirt down here. Pretty short little whip. Rearing. Well, that's when a horse is going to rise up on its hind legs. And maybe that's good in parades and rodeos if you wanted to do that. One time I was riding bareback in the middle of nowhere, and the horse reared on me, and since I was bareback, I just slid off the back and luckily didn't hurt my tailbone. But it took me about a half mile to convince the horse that I was its friend, to catch up to it. Okay, side saddle. That's interesting. It's just basically where a person is not astride. The rider is sitting sideways on the horse where both legs are on the same side of the horse. Okay, I mentioned this earlier when we had dam. That was the mom. The sire is the father of the horse. Now, if we talk about a horse that is sound, that's a good thing. A healthy horse with no obvious defects or health issues. She is sound. He is sound. Okay, well, a splint. This is where a ligament in the lower front legs become hardened, become bone, ossified. And of course, an image is good, so there's a splint right there, becoming bone. Well, stallion, we've talked about stallions before, but here's S and we have stallions, and it's a mature, uncastrated male horse. If it was castrated, then you remember we had in the G's the gelding. Stallions, not castrated. Okay, stargazer. I'm kind of laughing because, yeah, anyway, a horse that travels with its head held too high and its nose is in the air, just too high. Not good conformation. Well, sway back. This is never fun to look at. The span of the back dips in the center, forming a concave contour between the withers and the croup. So now you remember that. The withers are the top, really, the top up by the shoulder blades, and the croup is in the rear. So between those two regions, so the withers are up in the front, the croup is in the back, and we're going to get a concave. So like it said, the withers and the croup, we've got a concave region there. I'm not sure, I've seen it worse than this. Feels so bad for those animals. I'm not sure how much chronic pain they're in. A good equine veterinarian could tell you, but it doesn't look good. Sway back. Well, now we've got tack. Well, to the person on the street, they may not know this, but this is all the equipment that you use for horses: saddles, bridles, curry combs. Everything is stored in the tack room. And here's a very, looks like, well-maintained tack room. Got a lot of stuff: saddles, ointments, things to clean the saddle, just the rope, bridles. Oh my gosh, yeah. So that's the tack room. So here's another one of these interesting things. A twitch. So a twitch is a tool that can be used to restrain and calm a horse by twisting a cord or a chain around its upper lip. Sounds crazy, but it works. So this image shows a rope around the upper lip, and they're twisting it so it's going to constrict, because believe it or not, this is still part of the nose here. And of course you see the upper incisors. But sometimes if you do that, you can calm down the horse or control the horse better. It gets their attention. Okay, typey. I guess I put it in there because it's a T term. That's a horse that looks like it's supposed to against the breed standard. So what a Percheron's supposed to look like, what a quarter horse looks like, what a thoroughbred looks like. Typey. Well, now we have on sound, so that's going to be just the opposite of sound, which we had not long ago. So it's not looking healthy, doesn't have a great gait. It's on sound. Something, if you're buying horses, you don't want to buy. Okay, so we did talk about vices before, so it's a bad habit. And there's all kinds of vices, stable vices like cribbing, biting people, kicking. Got to remember, horses can bite you. And man, they're forceful, so be careful around horses. Okay, so now we have warm-blooded. So that's going to be between the cold-blooded and the hot-blooded. So it's kind of a medium-weight horse, and maybe it's a cross between a draft horse and a light horse. There's some place in between, not hot-blooded, not cold-blooded, but warm-blooded. Well, a whirl. This is exactly what it sounds like, a circular formation of hair on the horse's neck, but it can be in the head any place neck and head usually. So I'll show you what a whorl looks like. Okay, here's the whorl. This is on the neck. There's the mane, part of the mane up there. So we did have this kind of before, wind sucking. It's where a horse is cribbing, latching on to some object or board with its incisors, and then they're going to be sucking in air. They're bored usually. Well, now we have withers. We've had it before, but that's really the area up above the shoulder blades from which hands are measured. But we didn't get to it because it hasn't been W yet. Okay, so in this horse, this is the withers, and for hands, we'd go like right about that midpoint and then straight down to the ground. And then we would say the horse was so many. And again, we have had wolf teeth in our discussion, in our definitions, but it's got its own little image now because it's a W, and it's very small vestigial first molars that appear between 5 and 12 months of age. I don't think we said that before. And, more than half of the horses have them. More common in the upper jaw, left and right. They're usually removed because they're not really buried into the jaw much. So I'm going to show you how to remove wolf teeth. It was done by an expert, of course. So let me orientate you. This is obviously the roof of the mouth. And this is rostral up here. Rostral means towards the nares. This is caudal. Here are the premolars and then the molars. There's the canines. And there's two there. And we can't see, this is the upper jaw. So I'm going to assume there are some canines in the lower jaw. So this is probably a stallion. And the wolf teeth sit right here. They're never going to sit anyplace else but tucked up right by that first premolar. Okay, so now this image is going to show a side view of the wolf tooth right here. This is the upper arcade, and that's the first premolar, upper premolar. This is the lower premolar. So this is rostral over here. This is caudal going that way. So it's right there, and we're going to take it out. Well, now we're injecting some lidocaine in it, but now we're on the other side of the horse. So, when I said the directions, now they're opposite. So here's the upper premolar. So that means caudal is this way, rostral is up here, but we're injecting lidocaine into the socket. So here they have pulled two wolf teeth out. This person is good because you always wonder, when you take an image of something, you'd like to have a size comparison. So there's a finger there so you can see they're not massive, but they pulled them out, they weren't involved, and that socket is going to heal well. Zebroid. That's a hybrid from breeding a zebra with any other equine. Any other equine. So you can get quite the patterns of color and stripes. Zebroid. So here's some zebroids. And you can look them up and see how you can, get these guys. But they're all going to have some kind of stripes on them. And notice the leg stripes are usually more horizontal, vertical on the body. Zebroids. Very interesting. Well, now that's the last word. Zebroids was the last word, but I just wanted to make a couple points. Some of you are very interested in anatomy and physiology, and this image on the left, I actually saw it in person, This is a horse, and that's a real person that donated their body to science. And there's a gentleman in Germany that he goes around the world displaying these dissected animals and people. The display is called Body Worlds. I'm over here on the right now. Yeah, and I was up 2 inches away from that point right there. They're all plastinated, and it's quite a process, but all the tissues basically are infiltrated with plastic, not formalin. Like if you ever dissect animals and you go someplace and you're dissecting animals, there are safer things than formalin now, and formalin stinks. But these specimens, and the humans are real. They're real. They've donated their body to science. In fact, the one on the left there, he's holding his brain, and on the other side, you can't see it, he's holding the horse's brain, and ends up being the person's brain is bigger than the horse's brain, but you can't see that there. Anyway, if you ever get a chance and you're some big town and they're having Body Worlds display, they are totally fascinating, and I'm so glad I was able to see that horse in person and appreciated the anatomy. Okay, so I just have a final comment or two. And one is humor's always good. I got this horse for my husband. Sounds like a good trade. Yep, that sounds about right. The definitions of my 100 that I defined are unique because there's not many places that show images of what we're talking about, like beans, frogs. There was a good website. There is a good website, I should say, at Iowa State. There's the URL up there. I think you have to like type it into your browser because I don't think you can click it here. But they have a great definition, but there's no pictures. So I think that's why I did this. I spent hundreds of hours putting these things together, recording them, re-recording them. One time my microphone wasn't working well and everything sounded like I was in a cave. Hopefully this is better, but it's been fun, and I didn't use all the terms that you can. I didn't do much on coat color, all the socks and all that kind of stuff, and there's a lot of things missing, but it gives you an idea. 100 terms. Take care. I had a lot of fun.